The man across the table didn't blink. He read from a page as if it were a grocery list. You are no longer authorized to operate any system within this company. Celia, 14 words. No eye contact, no hesitation, just a cold sentence that ended 12 years of devotioning, 49 seconds. They thought I'd leave quietly. What they didn't know was the exact words triggered something I had buried deep in the system, something they couldn't undo. But this unraveling didn't start in that room. It started a week earlier with a glitch in Frankfurt that no one else noticed, but I couldn't think. It started with a blinking field in the Frankfurt logistics interface. Just one line of code failing to validate a route confirmation. To most it would look like a hiccup, harmless, routine. But to me, it felt off. I leaned in. The timestamp was wrong by 3 milliseconds. The protocol used to flag handoff wasn't the one I designed, and the routing table had a strange duplication pattern, something that wouldn't just happen. Someone had touched the architecture. I routed access and checked the system logs. The notification came from Singapore, not by accident, not by one of my team. It had been pushed through by a new admin credential I didn't recognize, a name I'd never seen before. I should have been furious, but what I felt was something colder, duller, a slow crawl of suspicion beneath my skin. My name is Celia Thornwell. I'm the principal systems architect behind Kestrel Dynamics International Operations for 12 years. I've kept this company's 9-country supply chain, breathing, optimizing routes, building disaster failovers, protecting vaccine deliveries during crisis, even once rerouting P-cross oceans overnight. I'm not a face on a brochure. I'm the reason Kestrel runs on time. That system glitch, it wasn't just code to me. It was personnel because the engine they tried to alter its name flashed quietly in the console, .centra.os. No one at Kestrel knows what that name means. They've never asked. But it was my sister's name, Centra. She died when I was 24. A shipping delay in our rural hospital meant her medication arrived too late. That moment didn't just break me, it forged me. I built the Centra system to make sure no family in any country would ever wait in the dark, like I did. So when I saw that line of code, my code being altered by someone with new clearance, something clenched in me. I pulled up the authorization logs. The update had been approved, but not by me. Someone in leadership had quietly rooted system control, and if they were confident enough to overwrite me, that meant something was already in motion. Is it back in my chair, breathing slow? It wasn't the glitch that scared me. It wastes fact that someone thought I wouldn't notice. I didn't have to wait long to find out who had the authority to overwrite me. His name was Bryant Listister. The first time I saw him, he was standing in front of the entire operations team on the 18th floor. Gray shirt, no tie, sleeves perfectly creased. He didn't smile, didn't ask for introductions, just launched into a presentation with a title that said everything about him. Efficiency before legacy. His voice was calm, but mechanical, like someone who'd practiced every word. He didn't talk about people. He talked about margins, redundancies, and output ratios, about turning Kestrel into a scalable investor-forward enterprise. Not once did he mention the system fouled all of it together. Not once did he look at me. I watched his fingers flick through slides that reduced entire departments to bullet points. There was no warmth, no curiosity, only precision. It was the kind of man who didn't believe in asking how something worked, only how fast it could be replaced. 2 days later, I was called into his office. His assistant said he wanted a quick strategic sync. I walked in, expecting small talk, maybe a tour of the system's new reporting dashboard instead. He looked up from his laptop and asked, without preamble, what would it take to rebuild what you built without you? I froze. Not outwardly, but internally. My mind ran a loop in less than a second. Did he not realize what he just said, or worse? Did he? I kept my voice even. That depends on what you're trying to build. He gave you a small shrug. Just theoretical. If we ever want to restructure, move parts offshore, or make the platform more investor transparent. I nodded slowly. You'd need more than a new framework. You'd need context. You'd need alignment. He didn't seem interested in any of that. He just said, noted, and returned to his screen. As I walked out of his office, a slow dread coiled in my chest. It wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't ask. Not once did he inquire what problems the system solved. Not once did he acknowledge what it cost to build. It was clear he didn't want to understand it. He wanted to control it. Later, that afternoon, I tried to shake the feeling. I went back to my team. ran updates, checked access logs. That's when I noticed it. 3 new administratornums had been added to the core directory, each with level 4 modification rights. One of them had pushed the Singapore patch. Those were rights only I had until now. Even Thier in the building felt different. I passed 2 junior engineers in the hallway, and they gave me a tight, polite nod, but their eyes dropped quickly. Whispers moved faster than emails in companies like this. People sensed changes before they were announced. By 7 that evening, the halls were nearly empty. I stayed late to finish performance reports, trying to ignore the weight pressing against my chest. On my way out, I passed by the shared printer near HR. It was still humming. Someone had forgotten to collect a stack of documents. I glanced at the top page, Q for Restructuring Dastis Confidential Draft. My name wasn't what I was looking for, but it was what I saw first. Thornwell, Celia A. first on the list, marked in red. I didn't need to read the justification line, but I did anyway. Legacy architect, high salary, proprietary skill set, risk factor if removed abruptly. And beside it, a tag red flagged for priority, exit. I stood there in the dim light, the soft whir of Thiepertor filling the silence. For 12 years, I had given them everything. Minites, my flights, my fingerprints in every line of logic that kept this company alive across 9 countries. Now, I was a bullet point, a calculation. I left the page exactly where I found it, walked past the elevator, took the stairs outside. The sky had cracked open with a cold drizzle. I stopped under the awning and looked up at the glass-paneled building where Centra still pulsed quietly in the back end. Still running, still steady, still mine. They thought they were replacing a part. They had no idea they were tugging at the foundation, and the foundation remembers list confirmed what I already knew. But I wasn't just worried about being cut loose. I was worried about what they might break while doing it. Early the next morning, I unlocked my office before sunrise. The halls were still dark, the hum of the servers barely audible through the walls. I didn't turn on the lights. Some part of me wanted to remain unseen. Even by the system I had once, designed to notice everything. I slipped into the terminal console and dove deep past the daily metrics beneath, interface dashboards and into the logic architecture that only I had mapped in full. My fingers moved on mescal memory, bypassing layers I had locked down years ago. These were the root branches, the heartbeat of Centra. Something had changed. Lines of logic that were once immutable now showed signs of tampering. Not deletion. No, that would have raised alarms, but subtle modifications. A function here redefined a sequence delayed by milliseconds. A new override script nested between 2 core verification steps. And then there it was, a rewritten clause that bypassed the emergency override for Frankfurt's transit node. It was delicate, almost elegant, but it wasn't mean. Someone was trying to clean around the edges of a bomb without realizing it was live. I sat back for a moment, my chest tight. I wasn't angry. I was alert because I knew what this meant. They were just replacing me. They were tampering with a system they didn't understand. Back in 2017, after a major cyber attack hit our industry, our CEO, at the time, Thomas Marin, called Minto his office. He'd just read about a pharmaceutical logistics firm that lost millions in refrigerated vaccine space. Their central routing system had been hijacked. "Can you build something?" he asked me. "That shuts you down before someone else can." It wasn't just a challenge. It was a directive, a trust. And so I wrote a single line kill switch buried beneath 6 security layers. A quiet line of logic designed, never to be seen unless you were looking for it. It didn't sound like a command. It sounded like a sentence someone might say on a bad day. "You are no longer authorized to operate any system within this company." Celia, 14 words. If spoken by an executive with a right vocal cadence, it would be detected by the system's natural language input sensors. A confirmation check would fire, awaiting biometrico verified from me within 90 minutes. If it didn't receive it, it would initiate global soft shutdown, sequential country by country, like dominoes. I never thought I'd need it, but I wasn't naive enough to think it couldn't happen. And now the logic string surrounding that phrase had been flagged for review by a user I didn't recognize. I checked the system credentials. The tag read blister admin. My gut twisted, not just because it was a sloppy alias. It was him, Bryant Listus. I ran a quick cross-check on his employment history before Kestrel. He'd been at Vero, a smaller logistics tech firm that suffered a massive network outage 5 years ago. I remembered the incident clearly. In fact, I had been the one they brought into consult on recovery. I'd traced the fault back to a single architectural flaw. An insecure uthana module installed under pressure from an ambitious young VP. The name hadn't meant much to me then, but now with fresh eyes, I remembered. THATVP had been Bryant Listister. He had tried to bury his mistake beneath a mountain of misdirection and PR spin. I had quietly corrected it, and now he was trying to dismantle my system. I stared at the screen, the glow casting hard shadows across my hands. They were steady, but my breath had shortened, not from fear, from certainty. This wasn't about efficiency. This was personal. I backed up the current build and saved a copy of the untouched 2019 architecture onto an external drive before I opened the DevNotes module, one only I had access to, and left a quiet entry. They're not just changing code, they're rewriting memory. I leaned back in my chair and opened the systems map. Singapore, Frankfurt, Nairobi, all lit faintly with a soft flicker. Not red, not yet, but active. It hadn't collapsed, not yet, but they had pulled the first thread. And I wasted only one left who remembered where it led. They weren't just rewriting my code. They were rewriting the story I spent 12 years building. And stories, unlike systems, don't shut down quietly. I met with Alan Baer, my longtime legal advisor, in a quiet cafe tucked between two shuttered bookstores, one of those places where time moved slower and words mattered more. He'd been with me since the very beginning. Back when I was still consulting out of my apartment, running Centra on nothing but caffeine and grief. I slid my laptop across Theatable and showed him the original build. The earliest lines of logic, for the Centra OS timestamped 3 weeks before I officially joined Kestrel. The biometric fallafe, the logic letters, the query optimization routing, they were all mine, pre-employment unambiguous. He studied the code like a man reading a will. "This is yours, Celia," he said finally. "Legally, if they attempt to repackage or sell this segment without your consent, you have grounds." The words should have comforted me. But they didn't, because I hadn't built Centra to keep. I built it to give to the company, to the world, to the people counting on their insulin arriving on time, their supplies making it through customs, their lives depending on milliseconds of precision. And now I had to prove I still deserved to keep what I never asked to own. That's what hurt the most. But cut the office. I barely had time to log in before Bryant called me up. No warning, no subject line, just a tour email. Dropped by my office before noon. His office was pristine, sterile. There was no trace of paper, no photos, not even a screensaver. He didn't invite me to sit, just slid a cream envelope across his desk. "This is a disengagement package," he said plainly. "Nothing dramatic, no burn bridges. We appreciate your work, Celia, but the board shifting priorities. We're going lean." I opened the envelope, a 2-pag agreement couched in legal niceties and corporate platitudes. A severance amount that barely covered 3 months of rent. In exchange, I'd hand over all documentation, remain silent about any internal systems, and agree not to consult for competing firms for 2 years. I looked up. "You're calling Thistlian." He gave a thin smile. "It's market standard. Consider it an elegant close for 12 years of my life." I didn't argue, didn't throw I just nodded, tucked it into my folder and walked out. But the moment the elevator doors closed, my throat tightened, not from shock, from recognition. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated eraser, and the eraser had already begun in that night at home. I poured a glass of wine, I didn't touch, and stared at the cream envelope for nearly an hour. Then I opened my laptop, more from instinct than intention. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I found it. An email, no subject, no sender name, just a system address from Kestrel's internal network. The body contained only one line. "They're gutting your system for a fast IPO push. Ask about Singapore." I froze. Gutting, not revising, no optimizing. Gutting. I opened the logs. There it was. Lines of code recently marked for removal layers of redundancy, conflict mitigation, logic, real-time rerouting tools, all flagged as non-essential architecture. Those were the pieces that protected the system from collapse. The exact tools that kept a logistics chain running when weather hit, when politics changed, when borders closed. And now they were cutting them out for OneAsone to make the system look leaner, more scalable, more profitable. Singapore had already had 2 outages that week. They weren't reporting them, they were hiding them. And in doing so, they were rewriting my system, not to improve it, but to sell it. I closed the logs and reached for the envelope again. For a second, I thought about signing it, walking away, starting fresh. But then I thought about that little girl in Jakarta whose cancer treatment had arrived 1 hour late until Sentra rerouted through a storm. About the old man in Morocco whose heart meds had reached him just in time because the system rerouted mid-flight. You don't amputate the brain of a system and expect it to survive. And you don't silence the person who remembers how to keep it breathing. I slid the envelope into the drawer, unopened, unsigned, and opened a blank file instead. The title read, "If they push, I pull." I didn't respond to the exit offer. I didn't make noise. I simply went quiet. And in this company, silence was often mistaken for surrender. But I wasn't surrendering. I was preserving. That night, just past 9 o'clock, the office was mostly dark. The only light still glowing came from the emergency signs and the faint pulse of the server room. It was the same hum used to find comforting, the sound of a living system, one I had built line by line. Now it sounded like a dying heart. I logged in using my master credentials, still active for now. If Brian's team had started the process of revoking my access, they hadn't finished yet. A mistake, one I intended to use. From my bag, I pulled a cold-forged external drive, a private encrypted backup tool I kept for disaster scenarios. In theory, I should have never needed it, but these days disaster didn't wear the face of war or weather. It wore a crisp gray suit, and smiled while offering you an exit clause. I opened the terminal and accessed the stable build of Centraust 20209. The final untouched version before they began pruning it for IPO optics. I began copying. It was like watching my own heartbeat load file by file. Folder by folder, routing protocols, emergency delivery logic, multi-rein verification tools. The layers were dense, heavy, precise. Every line had a story behind it. Some I'd written at 3 a.m. with coffee-stained fingers. Some after a funeral, some after a child's medicine or a vid in time, because my code made the impossible happen. And when the system prompted me to document each module for archival, I did carefully, thoroughly, until I reached that part I left blank. No description, no code snippet, just assaillant omission. One only I would notice. The system blinked a warning. Incomplete documentation detected. Proceed anyway. I clicked. Yes, you didn't teach people how to dismantle a weapon while it's still aimed at something worth protecting. As the backup reached 93%, a pop-up flickered onto my screen. Not from the local system, but from a secure comms tool buried deep in the network. Something I'd helped design years ago, but hadn't used since. Secure channel request R. Calderon. My breath caught. Rene Calderon had been one of the sharpest IT consultants Kestrel ever had. Before he left quietly 3 years ago, long before Bryant arrived, we hadn't spoken since. One message appeared. Your trigger is still active across all nodes. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed confirmed. His response came instantly. Tested from Singapore node this morning. Still pinging your signature. I closed my eyes. They hadn't disabled me. They couldn't because the root-level authentication I had built, my failsafe, still recognized me as the only override key. They'd wiped layers, renamed files, restructured flows, but had missed the trigger. 14 words, spoken with precision, and only I could cancel what would follow. I unplugged the drive, heart pounding under layer-soft numbness, not from fear, from restraint. The kind of quiet rage that didn't explode, but compressed itself into purpose. I knew what they were doing. I'd seen the signs. The IPA numbers had too. Look lean. Bryant needed a system that could appear scalable, look efficient, sell well, but he was cutting the structural integrity to get there. And if it all failed, I'd be the name on the error report. Still, I didn't lash out. I didn't write an email. I did the one thing I knew how to do better than anyone in that building. I finished the job as I shut everything down. I left one hidden entry in the system logs. A note only a person with root access could ever read. If they want to break it, fine, but they'll break it with me still inside. Then I stepped out into the hallway. The officey behind me, silent as stone. No one saw me leave. No one asked where I'd been, but the system knew, and it remembered who had last touched the heart of it. I thought the worst damage would be internal. Efficiency lost. Code corrupted. Egos inflated. But then I saw a name in a flagged report. David Camo, age 24, junior systems engineer in Nairobi. And just like that, the consequences weren't theoretical anymore. The report came from a private back channel. A thread among a few former Kestrel engineers still watching from the sidelines. A shipment of pediatric vaccines bound for 3 rural hospitals in Keefe County had been delayed 26 hours. Temperatures had fluctuated. Protocols had failed. 3 clinics had to cancel appointments.